Speaking of that, by the way, let's move on to the next part here, because this is equally part of the whole Russia op. Let's put this up there on the screen. This has become the latest cause. U.S. warns allies Russia could put a nuclear weapon into orbit this year. The American assessments are divided. President Vladimir Putin denied having such intention, saying that Russia was categorically against it. It would be against one of the treaties that we've all signed with respect to space, not necessarily meaning that they wouldn't do it. But the reason why I think that this is important is this is all traced back to the congressman who ignited a domestic fervor when he said, Krystal, there is dangerous intelligence that needs to be declassified and made known to the American people, at the exact same time that there was a huge push in the House of Representatives to reauthorize FISA and spying powers by the National Security Agency. And lo and behold, ever since that leak, now the space nuke has become like the latest reason why we all have to be terrified. We need to get into an arms race. And what nobody ever declines to tell you is this. Number one, even if the alleged device is real, and if it is, ever launched, it is not capable of launching from space to the Earth. It is specifically an anti-satellite weapon. Right. Now, let me again clue everybody into this. As everything in space is quote unquote dual use. If you have a satellite, for example, that you can course correct, let's say, this way or that way, you also technically have a satellite which you could course correct into another satellite if you want to. It doesn't matter if it's a nuke or not. All of us, the Chinese, Russians, Americans, even the commercial space companies, we have the capability to screw each other's comms up if we want. In a lot of ways, it's mutually assured destruction, because if we do it to them, then they might do it to us. This does not really change any strategic position in space at all. That's number one, from an actual space point of view. Two, it is so obviously an effort in recent days to gin up even more being terrified of Russia as some sort of military power where, and this is where, again, I can't square it. On the one hand, we're supposed to support Ukraine, this piddly army, which is literally incapable of producing its own bullets because the Russians are so weak and they're going to crush them and move them past their borders. And then on the other, it's the new Soviet Union. It's 1956 or whatever. And we got Sputnik, and we need all this on. Listen, you're being propagandized. Nobody's being honest with you about what actual real threats or any of that look like. And yet, here we are. And you got the New York Times. That's the front page of the New York Times, just so everybody knows. And the national security people are freaking out about this. They're ginning up why we need more weapons, why, somehow we can defeat the space nuke if we defeat Putin in Ukraine. It's they're shameless. Yeah. In the way that they do this.
Yeah, and they wanted, to use this not only to scare people into, okay, we gotta, I guess, ship their Ukraine funding, but also we need to reauthorize warrantless surveillance on Americans. That's the sort of use that this fear is intended to be put towards. So you are being manipulated. I mean, the psyops around Russia are so much more powerful with the American public than the actual Russian influence operations are. And also to be clear about this potential capability, even American intel agencies that were talking in the New York Times were very split and divided on the reality of what is going on here. There's also a reality that, if Russia was theoretically to use some space nuke, that they would likely be taking out their own satellites in addition to our satellites. So in any case, it sounds very, very scary. If you say Russian space nuke, that sounds terrifying. The reality is not something to say okay, we can just hand wave away and it's no concern whatsoever. But it isn't categorically different than the current status quo reality. So, again, take these things in context of what they actually mean and also what they're being pushed to the public in order to try to compel you to accept. Anytime a politician is really pushing fear the way that these national security hawks on the Republican side in particular and Congress were pushing, you need to ask what their goal is and what they're trying to get you to swallow.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Nobody's honest with you about space, like I just said. We already have the capability to all destroy each other's satellites if we want to. America has a program which is actually pretty cool, called the X-37B, which is a robotic spacecraft. It just flies around up there. It's been flying around up there for years. None of us have any idea what it does. It drives the Chinese and the Russians nuts. So it's not like all all of us aren't doing the exact same thing. And it fits also into a broader program where we're just supposed to accept, you know, the established policy response from Washington with no question. Put this up there, the latest one. President Biden, after he said that there would, quote, be devastating sanctions, has now, if Navalny died, is now saying that he will hit Russia, quote, with major sanctions in response to the death of Navalny. Now, here's the thing. It says the new sanctions are designed to hold Russia accountable for what happened to Mr. Navalny, as well as all of its actions over the course of this vicious and brutal war. Here's the issue. We've already sanctioned this economy to hell. There's like not a living Russian who's even connected to the government that can set foot in the West now at this point, access a bank account, you know, you can't sell them weapons or anything. What else are we supposed to do, you know, in terms of our sanctions? And how well have they worked? Russian war material is at an all-time high. They're buying as many things as they want from the North Koreans. The Chinese and the Indians are floating their whole economy. Clearly, sanctioning them has actually, frankly, just made them more self-sufficient away from the entire Western system. So it just belies the question of, do we just do these things to make us feel better? Because I'm pretty sure that's the answer.
Yes, correct.
Right.
I mean,
it's like, what is this doing?
That's like all of our foreign policy at this point. Like, why are we hitting the Houthis? It's not like we think that it's going to change the status quo. We know that the problem is all because of Israel's assault on Gaza. But yeah, we do them to say that we did something, you know? I mean, it's just, we acknowledge there's no military solution to Hamas. What the hell are we doing then? What are we supporting? But it, again, is just like, you know, this sort of kayfabe, and it's the same thing here. Russia is already, you know, one of the most sanctioned countries in history, and they, not to say it hasn't had any impact, but they had the ability to plan to be sanctioned in the future because they'd been sanctioned in the past and prepare for it. And their economy is actually doing much better at this point than Israel's economy, to use another example. So most likely, these sanctions will probably, rather than targeting the you know, oligarchic elites in Russia, they will very likely be because, you know, the oligarchic elites are already heavily sanctioned. These are probably going to be the sort of things that hurt ordinary Russians who, you know, have nothing to do with an autocratic leader and his prerogatives and priorities. And just, you know, the last thing that I have to point out about Navalny, because we're covering Julian Assange's, you know, continued extradition appeal going on in the UK. I mean, Julian Assange is in very poor health. He's been so weak that he was unable to participate in these hearings, even remotely, even by Zoom. So, you know, his family has been telling us for a long time now that his life is truly in jeopardy and on the line directly because at this point of the Biden administration, started under the Trump administration, but now the continuation and commitment of the Biden administration to prosecute this man because he revealed the secrets of American elites and embarrassed them and was in many ways you know, a dissenting and oppositional figure. It's not that different from the circumstances surrounding Navalny's death. So there is so much hypocrisy, too, with regard to the Biden administration and their purported commitment to freedom of the press and not jailing, you know, persecuting political opponents, et cetera. So I just wanted to make that note as well while we're thinking about sanctions and Navalny here.
You should. And unfortunately, it's something that Putin throws in our face also every time.
Absolutely.
Every chance that he gets.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.